You're watching a special programme here on France 24. The news that Pope Francis has died, aged 88. The announcement coming this morning, Easter Monday, from the Vatican. We heard from the Catholic prelate earlier, Cardinal Farrell, who broke the news that he died at 7:35 local time. Well, Vivienne Walt, the parish correspondent for Time magazine. I mentioned a moment ago she would be with us. Vivienne, it's great to have you on the programme today. Talk me through your thoughts, reflections of the death of the Pope.
Well, so in as much as this is, of course, a day of mourning for hundreds of millions of Catholics, there's also a very fierce debate already underway about what comes next. And it goes beyond a lot of the social issues that we've just been hearing about, abortion, gay rights, and so on. Perhaps the most divisive issue of all is migration. Francis was a very vocal and passionate defender of migrants, and it put him directly at odds with, of course, the Trump administration previously and now, including J.D. Vance, whom he was the last public person to see him yesterday, but also in Europe, where you had a number of bishops come out and say, you know, he's a woke president. Don't give us another woke president. I'm sorry, not President Pope. It was a woke Pope. You can really see online the debate about, you know, please don't appoint another woke Pope. And a number of the bishops in Europe sort of coming out and saying, you know, migration is going to erode the Catholic nature of Europe. So I think this is going to be a major issue going forward, both in whom the cardinals finally vote for as their next pope, but also in how that pope is received globally.
It's very interesting because in his tone, there are those that say, particularly go back to 2013, where he talked about the issue of gay clergy. And his quote at the time, he said, "Who am I to judge?" And that was taken by many as a very progressive step. And yet there are those that look at the doctrine on both sides and say either he's gone too far or hasn't gone far enough. But the doctrine, he stays firmly to the Catholic stance on many of its teaching. I mentioned before abortion, surrogacy. He called that diabolical, the act of surrogacy, euthanasia, gender reassignment, which he called ugly. And yet, tonally, he met with a number of trans groups. He also said that they could be given blessings in the church. He stopped short of saying that they could have holy matrimony in terms of marriage. But there's the bind, I guess, ultimately for whoever leads the Catholic Church. And you talked about the criticism that he was too, quote, woke. There is a saying, isn't there, in Rome, after a fat pope, a thin one. It was seen that John Paul II, Cardinal Ratzinger as well, who became Benedict XVI, that they were within that rigid role, and where he is to many seen as much more progressive and advanced. And I guess that also leads to a question of what comes next.
Absolutely. And just to take the first part of what you said, those words, "Who am I to judge?" were truly powerful because this was the Pope. The Pope was the one always to judge. And for him to actually say that was so telling and in a way captured so much what he represented, a kind of openness. But it had very strict limits. And it had limits on the ground as well. And this comes to the second thing that you said. He could say, yes, we have to bless gay couples. But in fact, in many, many parts of the world, that was never done. And in fact, the African bishops came out and said, we're not blessing any gay couples. We don't believe in this. We strongly condemn it. And there are many who can perhaps predict or forecast that the next pope, in terms of the pendulum swinging backwards, might come from Africa. It's the fastest growing population of Catholics. You've got 250 million or so already, and growing fast in number. And yet the African church, so much as you can call it one entity, is a very, very conservative one. Mm-hmm. It's way to the right, if you like, more conservative socially than Europe and most of America, the Americas. So for them to choose as the next pope the first black pope would make sense both demographically, but also in terms of the pendulum. It would look like a kind of progressive, groundbreaking act, but in fact, in terms of the theology, would swing back to what was there before Francis.
It's a very interesting point as well, isn't it? Because in terms of population sizes, many reports now about the centre of gravity of the centre of the Catholic Church moving far towards West Africa in particular.